I want to delve into something which I find personally very, very interesting. And it's I've got 3 slides on learning techniques. So this is kind of how to optimize your learning. And the reason why I think this is really important is that I hear this time and time again from every single FCS candidate. There's just so much information. What I read 3 months ago is already left my brain. It's gone. And I just can't retain the information, and it's very frustrating. So there are some techniques that you can use to optimize the way that your brain stores information. So when you read something in a textbook, it sits in your short-term memory. And through various pathways, it may then go into your long-term memory, and it may stay there. And there may be, almost, if you think about bridges from your long to your short-term memory, which allow you to pull that information back into your short-term memory when you need to relay it in a exam setting or in a real-life clinical setting. So there are ways that you can optimize this process taking place. The first technique you can use is the when of learning. So this technique is called distributed learning, and it means spacing out your engagement with the same content over multiple study sessions over a long period of time. This is the opposite of cramming, where you're trying to shove a new chapter into your brain in a short space of time before the exam. That kind of worked when you're in high school because the content was very limited. But for the FCS syllabus, it's quite large and broad, so it's not going to work. And cramming doesn't work well because your brain becomes bored with the excessive repetition, and the info just circles in your short-term memory. It doesn't go through to your long-term memory. Your brain needs time to process new content and to come back to it at different times, which is separated by sleep. So sleep helps you to consolidate that information. So if you sit and you cram like HBB for 24 hours straight, in 2 days' time, it's going to be all gone because your brain hasn't had time to it's going to like evaporate from your short-term memory. Your brain hasn't that time to put it and store it in your long-term memory and create paths to access it. So some practical tips is always try to come back to newly learned information within 24 hours of initial exposure. So if we have a tutorial on neuroendocrine tumors of the pancreas, then the next day, read that chapter in the textbook, whatever your textbook is, it's a student manual, Sabiston, or whatever. Go back and read that information. Or you see a patient with an interesting condition, or Prof. Panieri put something interesting on the quick cases group. If you got new exposed information, go back to it within 24 hours. And for our tutorial curriculum, we go through the whole FCS curriculum in 2 years. So it means you'll hear it twice if you diligently attend from your first year, which not all of you do. But the reason I attach the podcast episodes is exactly for this, for distributed learning, so that you can listen to an episode the day before or catch up afterwards. It's put on Vula, so you can also go back to it if you want. Or you can read the chapter in the textbook before the tutorial or afterwards. This definitely increases your chances of remembering the stuff that was said, improves your understanding. And I mean, some of you have demonstrated this in recent kind of tutorials, preparing well. I can guarantee you the people that had prepared and were answering the questions well are going to remember that information long-term, no doubt. Again, also you can do this for an operation list. If you're seeing an operation that is very important or you don't know that well, read up about it before. What are the different ways you can access that problem? What are the pitfalls? You can use Incision Academy as an adjunct if you have a subscription. And then if you didn't read up before or you did, you can also read up afterwards. So that's called distributed learning. And that means spacing out your engagement with the content. The next one relates to how you study, and this method is called retrieval practice. This improves the memory for information versus just passively reading and rereading stuff, which is what we often do. retrieval practice forces you to search your long-term memory, to explain stuff. And ideally, this should be done in your own spoken words and sentences. And the way you need to think about this is how you would answer an oral question. If I can give you an example, you could say you read a chapter on pregnancy-associated breast cancer, and then like, what are the things that are contraindicated for pregnancy-associated breast cancer? And then you'd list in your head things that are contraindicated in terms of workup is I can't use CT scan, we can't use nuclear medicine imaging, intraoperatively, I can't use methylene blue, and in terms of adjuvant therapy, we can't use radiation, this type of chemotherapy. And when you've done that, you check what you said against the source, whether it's a textbook or whatever. And what this does, it forces movement between your short and your long-term memory. And every time you do it, improves your understanding and improves your memory of that. So it's kind of a more active approach to not just reading and rereading and maybe highlighting and reading over your highlights. Of course, that helps. But forcing yourself to recite things back to you, and, pretend it was an oral exam, that really enhances the way you form memories. So this is when you're busy reading books or you're reading like online sites. And also when you're using Score Portal, which is the tool that we use to prep for the exams. This is kind of built into it, right? You're thinking what's the right answer, and you kind of read the summary afterwards. The last technique is something called elaboration. And through elaboration, you need to vary as much as possible how, where, and when you study. If there's a greater variety in terms of listening and talking and reading and writing and reviewing and thinking about stuff, whether it's content or it's some kind of skill, the stronger the connections in your brain will become, meaning that it's more likely it'll go sit in your long-term memory and become permanent memory. And this relates to what Anadi said, and I think what Meyer said as well, the practice of working in a group. So if you're just reading all the time, that is inferior in terms of building memory than if you had a study group where you listen to other people talk about it, when you discussed it with others. If you write summaries, that's a good idea. Creating pictures or images is quite powerful because images cue memory. So mind maps don't work for me, but they work for a lot of people. Your brain likes those things, likes to make connections and likes images. Or if you're making summaries using your own words, you don't have to make summaries because they take a lot of time, but you can simply talk through it with a study group. And this comes naturally when you're practicing oral questions.